During October, there are nights when the veil between the living and the dead thins, when cemeteries stir, old houses breathe, and shadows lean close to listen. Tonight is one of those nights. Welcome to Whispers After Dark, where the shadows speak and the night listens. Settle in by the fire, and before the stories begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because the whispers don't wait, and you won't want to miss what comes next. There are objects that outlive the holidays they once ended. Keepsakes that soak up every laugh, every tear, every shadow cast by flickering lights. Some of them remember more than they should, and a few never learn the difference between pretending and becoming. One listener begged me to share what happened the day curiosity slipped over his face like a second skin. This isn't a confession so much as a last-ditch warning. This is the Halloween masks. My name's Martin Keene, and I run an antique holiday shop called Curio and Cheer. Valentine cards from the 1890s, ceramic turkeys, glass-eyed Christmas angels. You name the season, I've probably got a relic of it humming with someone else's nostalgia. Late last winter, right before closing time, a woman glided in, coat of yellowed mink swinging around her ankles, a tilted hat pinned with what looked like a real blackbird wing. Her perfume smelled like cloves left in a crypt. She spoke only once. "I'm selling off the past. 2 trunks. Take them unseen, cash only." We didn't haggle over the price. She sold them cheap, and I handed over the money. Then she pressed a tarnished address tag into my hand and drifted back into the snow. I drove out the next morning. The house matched her perfume, beautiful once but hollowed out, windows boarded, shingles shedding like dead leaves. On the sagging porch sat 2 travel-scarred trunks, brass clasps already unlatched. No sign of the woman, just a note shoved under one handle, paid in full, never open alone. I should have walked away. Instead, I loaded the trunks and didn't touch them again until autumn crept up and inventory ran thin. September gave way to October. Tourists wanted spooky. I cracked open the first trunk and found a goldmine of vintage Christmas bulbs, turkey salt shakers, Thanksgiving greeting cards, exactly the harmless kitsch my shop lived on. The second trunk was different. Inside lay a jumble of masks, leather, bone, porcelain, burlap, each wrapped in tissue gone brittle as old skin. Most were vintage kids' masks from the 1970s, but there were 4 that stood out. The first was a hand-carved coarse wolf's snout, glass fangs and amber eyes that seemed to glow from within. It was beautiful in a creepy Halloween vibe sort of way. Then there was a hand-painted papier-mâché mask, a lacquered jester grinning too wide. Wrapped in a piece of old batik cloth was a tribal wooden face carved with spiral eyes. But the creepiest was at the bottom, half hidden, a warped thing stitched from what looked like funeral shrouds, mouth sewn shut in a jagged row of X's. I told myself I'd catalog them later, but the wolf mask kept staring. The next night was slow. Tuesdays normally are, so after the last customer left, I strapped it on. I blinked, and the next thing I remember, light was leaking through the front windows. My shirt smelled of pine sap and wet earth. 3 days missing, according to the wall calendar. The local news played on the shop radio. A family walking their dog in Sycamore Park had been mauled by a large, unidentified animal. Deep claw marks on trees, tracks that couldn't be matched to any known species. I locked the mask in the office safe, swore off touching the trunks, and swept the shop twice daily like penance. It didn't matter. The masks whispered. Or maybe it was just the wind whining through loose panes, learning to shape words. Either way, I listened. 1 week later, I tried the jester. Laughter, thin, metallic, and echoing, was the last thing I heard before blackness folded over me. I came to on my storeroom floor, cheeks crusted with dried paint and red and blue diamonds. The radio screamed about a midnight break-in at the psychiatric ward downtown. Nurses found balloons twisted into nooses and a message written in grease paint. "Try on a smile. I smashed the jester mask to shards and buried them behind the dumpster. Still, the compulsion returned, sharper each time, settling behind my eyes like a second set of lids. Halloween approached. Shoppers hunted costumes. I barely held it together behind the register. The final mask, the stitched one, seemed to breathe when I lifted the lid. Its fabric pulsed like something beating beneath it. I promised myself I would burn it at closing. But at 11:58 p.m. October 30th, the streetlights outside flickered off. The shop went black except for a single bulb above the counter, buzzing like a trapped wasp. My hands were already untying the mask's cords before I felt them move. It slid over my face like warm clay. Threads cinched at the back of my skull, dug into skin. Dark, syrupy silence swallowed me. I don't know how much time passed, an hour, a week. I woke on the storeroom floor, mask gone, mouth full of dust. The news spilling from a flickering TV spoke of 11 people vanished overnight. Trick-or-treaters, late shift workers, a cop directing traffic, all from streets radiating outward from my shop. Witnesses described a tall figure, wrapped in funeral gauze, eyes like slits of dying fire. Everywhere it went, the power died. I searched the store. The trunks were empty. Every mask gone. The front door was still bolted from the inside, yet muddy footprints led outside and vanished at the curb. I think the masks found new owners. I'm writing this with boards nailed over my windows and every mirror turned toward the wall. I can still feel the thread marks on my neck, itching like they're ready to cinch tight again. And sometimes, when the street goes quiet, I swear I hear muffled laughter, wolf howls smothered under burlap, jester giggles drowned in cloth. So listen carefully. If an old woman offers you a trunk of holiday curiosities, walk away. If you spot a mask that seems to breathe before you touch it, leave it in the dark. And if, God forbid, you wake up on November 1st with days missing and dust in your teeth, check the news. Because someone, maybe you, just wore Halloween longer than one night, and the masks are still swapping faces out there. Keep your own face safe, and whatever you do, never try on the last mask. There are houses the night tries to forget, places where the walls still breathe, where footsteps echo long after the floorboards rot. Some doors don't open for you, they open because of you. Have you ever felt drawn to a place like that? One of my listeners was. He sent me his story with a single request. Tell it exactly as I lived it. So I will. Believe it or don't. But once you hear it, you won't forget it. This is The Haunting at Rook Mansion. My name's Jake. I wasn't even sure I wanted to share this. I figured no one would believe me anyway. But at this point, I don't really care if you do or not. This happened. And I wish to God it hadn't, because if I'm being honest, I never should have stepped foot inside Rook Mansion. I never planned to spend a single hour, much less an entire storm-soaked night in Rook Mansion. I only wanted a few photographs for my urban exploration blog. One shot of the infamous staircase that, according to rumor, reached the landing and simply vanished. Old-timers said the house belonged to a recluse named Silas Rook, a man who lived alone so long the halls forgot how to sound like anyone else's footsteps. The gravel drive dissolved into mud the moment thunder rolled over the pines, stranding my car at the gate. With nowhere dry to wait, I crossed the sagging porch and found the door already ajar, as if the house had been expecting company. My flashlight beam quivered across water-warped wallpaper, and the scent of wet plaster mingled with something older, like books left to rot in a tomb. Inside, the air felt crowded, even though I was alone. Each board I stepped on sighed inward, then rose behind me as if inhaling my presence. I tried to laugh it off, but that laugh died the first time I caught movement in a gilt-framed mirror, a pale face hovering behind my shoulder. I spun around, nothing there. When I looked back, my reflection stood by itself, alone and shaking, the stranger gone. I wiped a sleeve across the glass. A cold palm print lingered where no hand should have reached. Farther in, Doors I'd closed moments earlier drifted slowly open. Portraits lined the corridor, somber Victorians in funereal black. But each time my light passed over them, their eyes followed. By the time I reached the notorious staircase, rain hammered the roof like desperate hands. The steps rose 10 feet, ended at blank wall, then resumed higher up, swallowed by gloom. I raised my camera for the shot and almost dropped it. Every preview image showed a woman in a widow's gown standing halfway up the impossible stairs, black veil rippling though the air below was perfectly still. She never appeared to my naked eye, only in the lens, hovering, patient. On the screen she beckoned, a finger curling just for me. A metallic thunk echoed behind me. The front door, my exit, had swung shut. When I hurried back, the knob crumbled in my hand like rotted wood, the brass flaking away as if it aged a century in seconds. Lightning flashed through cracked panes, and in that strobing light I saw her again, reflected in every window at once. The widow of Rook Mansion, inches away, veil brushing my cheek though nothing touched my skin. I stumbled room to room, hunted by drafts that smelled of cemetery earth. The chandeliers swayed though the air was stone still. In the dining hall, a place setting had appeared for one, dust-free, silverware perfectly aligned. The chair pulled back in mute invitation. My pulse drummed loud enough to drown the thunder. I found a study lined with warped books and hid there, hoping the storm would ease. Shadows pooled thick in the corners, and as minutes crawled by, I realized the house was breathing through me. Each inhale a tightening around my ribs, each exhale a whispered word I couldn't quite parse. Then the mirror above the desk bloomed with frost. On its fog-silvered surface, the widow's face pressed outward, veil plastered to unseen features, lips mouthing two words, "Stay, forever." The lights died. Something cold skimmed my spine. Reflex lifted my camera, and the flash burst white. In that single blink, I saw her fully, one skeletal hand buried wrist-deep in my chest, fingers curled around a heart I couldn't feel beating. The shutter closed. The room went black again. When I dared reopen my eyes, I was alone, sagging against the doorframe, breath ragged, chest aching like a phantom bruise. How I reached the porch, I still don't know. Dawn bled into the sky while the storm staggered east. I found myself kneeling in the drive, clothes soaked, camera gone. My phone was somehow untouched, only one image in the cloud, timestamped 3:04 a.m. Me on the staircase, mouth open in a silent scream, the widow's hand sliding from my chest as though she were pulling my heart back into her house. That morning I told myself I'd survived Rook Mansion. But when I close my eyes at night, I'm still inside, wandering endless halls that rearrange behind me, climbing a staircase that ends at darkness, until her veil brushes my cheek, and I feel that cold hand curling through my ribs once more. The mansion hasn't let me go. It has merely loaned me to daylight. So if you ever see Rook Mansion brooding at the end of its weed-choked lane, keep driving. Some houses aren't meant to be explored, and some doors, once they close behind you, never truly open again. There are nights when the wind carries faint carnival music no living band should be playing. Nights when rust-stained rides creak in the dark and painted smiles peel back to bare, grinning bone. Some midway lights never really go out. They just wait for someone foolish enough to notice. Would you ever walk into an abandoned carnival if the lights suddenly came on at midnight? Most of us would turn the other way. But one of my listeners didn't. He said he didn't even know why he went, only that something about the lights felt personal. He asked me to tell his story, not for sympathy, and not even for belief, just so someone would know what really happened. This is Painted Smiles. My name's Kevin. I went back and forth about telling this. Honestly, I figured most people would just roll their eyes or think I made it all up. But I've been living with this too long to care what anyone thinks anymore. Maybe if I showed you my face, you'd believe me. It happened. and I wish more than anything I'd kept driving that night instead of stepping through the gate at the Route 16 fairground. Everyone in town knew the place was cursed. The stories changed over time. Some said the Ferris wheel collapsed in the 70s and took a family with it. Others swore the carnival packed up in the middle of the night after a little girl went missing in the funhouse and was never found. But all of them ended the same. The fairground closed and it never reopened. Not officially, anyway. That night, I was driving home from covering a softball game 2 counties over for the local newspaper. Nothing but pine and dark stretch for miles. It was late, close to midnight, October 30th. I was passing the old turnoff when I saw them. Lights, faint at first, then flickering stronger, midway lights, red and gold and flickering like a pulse through the fog. The gate was still padlocked, but not hard. The chain looked like it had been twisted open and reclosed 1,000 times. My press badge was still around my neck. I guess I told myself I was just chasing a story. The second I stepped onto the midway, I heard it. That old shrieking Calliope sound, slightly off-key. It played slowly, dragging every note like it was being pulled out of something's throat. The whole place stank of mildew, wet wood, and stale popcorn. The air felt used, like 1,000 breaths had passed through it already. I glanced at my phone. It was just after midnight. Halloween. I actually chuckled, thinking maybe I'd snap a few eerie shots and run a Halloween feature for the paper. Ghosts of the Route 16 fairground, or something dumb like that. It felt oddly fitting at the time. Not so much. The first thing I noticed were the clowns. Not people, mannequins. Dozens of them, slumped against the game stalls and hot dog stands, limbs cocked at unnatural angles. Some had wigs, some were bald. All of them had faces that were too detailed, like someone had tried to sculpt emotion into plastic, but stopped right before getting its finger. Their eyes gleamed like wet glass, and when I turned to check one behind me, I swear it had shifted a few inches closer. At the far end of the midway was a large striped tent, mirror maze, faded sign said. No lights powered it. And yet the interior glowed red, like some kind of heartbeat was throbbing through the mirrors. They say curiosity killed the cat, but I went in anyway. Have you ever been in one of those places where you can feel something watching from all sides? The mirrors didn't just show me, they mocked me. Every reflection grinned wider than my real face. At first I thought it was distortion, but the longer I stayed, the more I noticed the difference. My reflection wasn't copying me anymore. It was acting on its own. I moved left. It stayed still. I blinked. It didn't. Then, it waved. At the center of the maze stood a figure. A clown, but not a funny one. Grease paint over skin so pale it looked dead. It was dressed like me, but its smile was impossibly wide, reaching almost to its ears. It held out a hand and gave me a faded, cracked ticket. It was cold, felt almost like ice. The words burned into it. Admit one, forever. When I looked up, the clown was gone. So was the exit. The mirrors had sealed into solid red glass, no seams, no doors. Just my own image in every direction, and behind me in every reflection, the clown's face, hovering an inch from my shoulder. I don't remember how I got out, not clearly. Something pulled me through. A sound, maybe, a voice. I remember running, but I don't remember moving. The next clear memory I have is standing on the shoulder of Route 16 at dawn, covered in white grease paint, shaking, my lips cracked from smiling too hard. That smile hasn't left me since. I've tried to scrub it off. Makeup removers, alcohol, bleach, even industrial solvents. Nothing works. Doctors say my facial muscles are locking into a condition they've never seen before. I'm always grinning. My cheeks hurt, my teeth ache. And every night, just before I fall asleep, I hear the Calliope again, somewhere far off but getting closer. There's something worse too. A week after it happened, I found that ticket again. I don't know how, it was in my back pocket, even though I threw it away. And now, whenever I turn off the lights, I swear I can see a faint red glow behind the bathroom mirror. Like someone waiting, smiling, beckoning. So take this for what it's worth. Believe me, don't believe me. But if you're ever out near Route 16 and you see carnival lights flicker on where no carnival should be, don't stop, don't slow down, and whatever you do, don't smile back. There are places where the earth never truly settles, where roots and bones tangle so deep they share the same slow heartbeat. People call them cemeteries. I call them warning signs the living keep ignoring. One listener sent me proof. She didn't ask for anything, and she certainly didn't want fame. She just needed someone to hear her before the ground covers the rest of her story. I'll just call her story, The Gravekeeper, and let you choose what you believe. My name's Clara, and I come from 4 generations of funeral directors. I was embalming with my parents before I learned long division, reading gravestones and making up stories about the people there like other kids read comic books. I enjoyed exploring the older part of the cemetery, and most days were spent wandering amongst the old moss-covered headstones. I even enjoyed bringing a book to read to the long dead while I ate my lunch under this huge old oak tree. Its limbs almost touched the ground in some places. It was beautiful with its drippy moss. I didn't have friends, at least living ones. Most people thought I was odd for spending so much time in the graveyard. When my uncle Jeremiah, the last caretaker of Maple Hill Cemetery, died, the town council handed me his ring of iron keys, figuring I'd feel right at home. I thought the job would be peaceful. Cemeteries usually are. The dead rarely complain. Maple Hill had other ideas. From my first week after accepting the job, the headstones wouldn't stay put. I just couldn't figure out what was going on. I had never seen the graves do this. I'd align them at dusk. By dawn, they leaned like drunks after last call. Fresh sod heaved upward in narrow ridges, as though something underneath kept stretching. I blamed frost, groundwater, shifting clay, anything but the stories my uncle used to mumble after too much whiskey. Graves grow when nobody's watching. The trouble centered on a grave close to the old tree, plot 219. Baby Eleanor, born 1886, died 1888. Her marker carried a stone lamb so weather-worn its face looked oiled smooth. One storm-thick evening, lightning forked across the sky, and I noticed the soil over Eleanor's grave was newly churned, rich, black, and damp as fresh coffee grounds. Before I could grab a shovel, I spotted it, a tiny handprint pressed up from beneath the mud. Fingers the size of bird bones. My chest knotted. I whispered that it must be water pressure. But when I turned away, the marble lamb bleated behind me, just one fragile, broken note. That night I dreamed of roots tugging at my ankles like pleading hands. When I woke, the sheets smelled of wet soil. Every evening after, plot 219 rose a little higher. The mound pushed skyward, ribs of pale root curling out like sapwood fingers begging to break free. I hammered stakes around the perimeter to keep visitors away. By Halloween, the grave stood knee-high, an earthen blister ready to burst. I decided to dig. If rot or gas or groundwater was to blame, I needed proof. Rain drummed the tarp of my hood as I jabbed my spade into the mound. 6 inches down, the dirt changed texture, loose, almost spongy. I scooped again. Something pale turned in the mud. Roots, but not roots. They were bleached smooth like ivory, branched in the shape of ribs. When my shovel struck them, the sound was sharp, like bone tapping stone. I scraped away more soil and uncovered a child-sized rib cage, delicate and deliberate, woven entirely from living wood. The ribs flexed toward me. I stumbled back, boots slipping. The ground split open along a jagged seam. Gray, fibrous tendrils, half plant, half vein, unfurled like knuckled fingers and wrapped around my calves. The rib cage rose from the earth, sap white and pulsing, crowned by a skull carved in the likeness of the stone man. It leaned close, roots creaking like old floorboards, and a childlike giggle sighed through its hollow chest. I screamed. No one answered. Vines slithered across the path, lashing the cemetery gates shut. Maple trees groaned, bark splitting as new sapling ribs sprouted from their trunks. Every grave around me swelled, mounds breathing in unison, hungry for air. I wrenched free and sprinted toward the caretaker's cottage. Inside, Uncle Jeremiah's journals lay scattered across the desk. Page after page described graves that flowered if tended to kindly, if whispered to, if touched with sympathy. He'd written one last warning in a shaking hand: the cemetery keeps what loves it. I understood then. Maple Hill hadn't chosen me by accident. It had been groomed by my family for generations, each caretaker feeding the roots with care and names and grief until the ground itself learned to grow the dead anew. I locked the cottage door, but vines crawled through the keyhole, thickening into fists that rattled the knob. Somewhere outside, that bleeding skull giggled like a wind-struck chime. If you're reading this, then the story reached you, and I'm already part of the soil, whether I'm buried in it yet or not. Maple Hill doesn't let its caretakers leave. I know now that if I ever stop tending the graves, they'll come for me. I feel them watching, waiting, growing restless if I'm late with even one offering of care. I read to them every day now from the bench beneath the old twisted tree at the center of the grounds. Sometimes I swear I see the gravestones shift, inching closer, like they're crawling just to hear me better. The pages shake in my hands, but I keep reading because if I stop, I don't know what will rise from the dirt to take my place. So I stay. I keep the paths clear. I whisper names. I make the dead feel seen. Because if I don't, they'll make me one of them. Maple Hill is still expanding, and it's always, always hungry for new hands. This concludes our story time for tonight. I hope you enjoyed these chilling Halloween tales, and thank you for spending your night with us here at Whispers After Dark. Though the stories end, the shadows never truly fade, and sometimes Halloween has a way of lingering long after the candles burn out. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss next week's journey into the dark. Our playlist below is filled with more haunted nights, eerie campfire stories, and gothic audiobooks to keep you company until then. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and beware of the Whispers After Dark.